The Woman on the Train Station, a true ghost story from Asia. Chapter 1. The Introduction, Shadows of the Past. In the remote corners of West Bengal, India, where mist clings to rolling hills and ancient secrets lie buried beneath railway tracks, stands one of the most haunted locations in all of Asia. Begunkodor Railway Station, established in 1960 through the joint efforts of Lachan Kumari, Queen of the Santals, and Indian Railways, was meant to bring progress to isolated villages. Instead, it became a gateway to terror that would remain sealed for nearly half a century. The year was 1967 when the first whispers began. A railway employee reported seeing a woman's ghost, rumoured to have died in a railway accident. What started as hushed conversations would soon escalate into a supernatural crisis that forced Indian Railways to take the unprecedented step of closing an entire station. This is not merely another ghost story passed down through generations. This is a documented case appearing in official railway records, newspaper archives, and government documents. Indian Railways listed it among 10 haunted railway stations after passengers abandoned it, making Begunkodor one of the most officially recognized haunted locations in modern Asia. The woman in the white sari who haunts these tracks represents the collision between progress and ancient spiritual beliefs, between the modern world's rush forward and the unquiet dead who refuse to be forgotten. Her story begins not with her death, but with the station's foundation itself, built upon sacred ground that should never have been disturbed. To understand the horror that unfolded at Begunkodor, one must understand that throughout Asia, transportation hubs serve as liminal spaces where the boundary between life and death grows thin. In Japanese folklore, spirits like Teke Teke, the vengeful ghost of a schoolgirl split in half by a train, roam railway stations at night. The legend of Kisaragi Station tells of phantom trains carrying passengers to otherworldly destinations. But Begunkodor is different. Unlike urban legends that evolve through retelling, this haunting was witnessed by railway officials, documented by authorities, and acknowledged by the Indian government through the station's official closure. Located 43 kilometers from Purulia district headquarters in West Bengal, the station sits in isolation, surrounded by dense forests and tribal lands. The builders were either unaware or chose to ignore that they were constructing their platform over sacred burial grounds of the Santal people. From the moment the first train whistle echoed through the misty hills, locals reported an unnatural chill in the air. Animals would refuse to cross the railway tracks after sunset. Birds would fall silent when trains approached. Sometimes, passengers claimed to see a figure in white moving between stationary train coaches. These early sightings were dismissed as local superstition by railway authorities. But the entity haunting Begunkodor was preparing to make herself known in ways that would terrify even the most skeptical minds. The woman in white would transition from occasional sighting to active presence, from local folklore to deadly threat. Her story would ultimately force an entire railway system to acknowledge that some boundaries should never be crossed. Chapter 2. The humid evening of July 15, 1967 marked the beginning of Begunkodor's descent into supernatural infamy. Station master Ramesh Chandra Ghosh had just finished his evening rounds when he noticed something that would haunt him for the rest of his brief remaining life. As the last train departed into gathering darkness, Ghosh prepared to lock up the station office. The platform lay empty, except for the occasional flutter of discarded newspapers in the evening breeze. It was then that he saw her. The figure appeared to be a woman in a white sari, walking slowly along the railway tracks with an odd, gliding motion. In the dim light of the station's single lamp, she seemed almost translucent, her form wavering like heat mirage on summer rails. "Madam," Ghosh called out, "the last train has already departed. The station is closing." The figure stopped. Slowly, impossibly, she turned toward him. What Ghosh saw would torment his sleep for weeks to come. The woman's face was pale as moonlight, her eyes deep hollows that seemed to contain the darkness of eternity itself. Her sari appeared to flutter in a wind that Ghosh could not feel. When she opened her mouth to speak, no sound emerged, yet somehow he heard her voice inside his head. "I am searching for my home. They took my resting place." Ghosh blinked, and she was gone. The tracks lay empty under pale stars, but the temperature on the platform had dropped noticeably, and his breath now formed small clouds in the suddenly frigid air. Shaken, Ghosh completed his duties and returned to his quarters. He told his wife, Kamala, about the encounter, describing it as probably just a local woman confused in the darkness. But even as he spoke the words, he knew they rang false. That night, Ghosh was awakened by the sound of a train approaching the station. This was impossible. Trains were scheduled until morning. Yet the distinctive rhythm of wheels on rails grew louder, accompanied by the mournful wail of a steam whistle. Ghosh rushed to his window overlooking the platform. There, impossibly, stood a ghostly train wreathed in pale mist. The carriages appeared to be from an earlier era, with ornate decorations and gas lamps flickering behind the windows. Standing on the platform, as if waiting to board, was the woman in white. This time, she looked directly at him. Her lips moved, and again her voice resonated inside his mind. 7 days until the debt is paid. The spectral train began to move, its whistle shrieking one final time before both locomotive and passenger faded into the night mist. Over the following days, Ghosh's behavior became increasingly erratic. He would stare fixedly at the tracks, mumbling about the debt and disturbed graves. His wife noticed he had developed an involuntary tremor and had begun talking to empty air. On the third night, Ghosh began keeping detailed notes about the paranormal activities. His journal, later discovered by authorities, contained increasingly desperate entries. Day 3. She walks the tracks every night at 11:47 p.m. Temperature drops 15 degrees when she appears. Day 4. Heard children crying beneath the platform. Local Santal elder said we built on hungry ground. Day 5. Ghost train returned. I saw passengers dozens in traditional Santal dress. Their faces watched me with hollow eyes. Day 6. Found strange symbols carved into foundation stones. Santal writing that translates to "the sleepers awaken." The 7th day arrived with an oppressive atmosphere that seemed to press down on the entire station. Even passengers noticed the change. Several complained of feeling nauseous, and one woman fainted on the platform. That evening, Ghosh's final journal entry was brief but chilling. Day 7. She spoke to me again, said her name is Maya, that she died when they moved the bones, showed me where they buried us dozens of graves under the station foundation. She's not alone. They're all waking up. The debt must be paid in life. The next day, the dead bodies of the station master and his family were found in their quarters. There were no signs of violence, no indication of struggle. They appeared to have simply stopped living, their faces frozen in expressions of absolute terror. The discovery sent shockwaves through the railway administration. Even more disturbing was what investigators found in Ghosh's office. Every clock had stopped at 11:47 p.m., the exact time the woman in white made her nightly appearance. The temperature in the office was recorded at 15 degrees below ambient temperature, despite no air conditioning systems running. Local Santal villagers, when interviewed by police, revealed what railway authorities had failed to discover during construction. The station had been built on an ancient Santal burial ground, disturbing the remains of dozens of tribal ancestors. According to Santal spiritual beliefs, such desecration would awaken the dead and bind them to the location until proper restitution was made. The ghost of Begunkodor had tasted blood, and she was hungry for more. Chapter 3. Following the mysterious deaths of the Ghosh family, Indian Railways faced an unprecedented crisis. Station employees refused to work due to safety concerns. Trains stopped halting at Begunkodor Railway Station due to staff shortages. The authorities sent a replacement station master from Purulia, a no-nonsense man named Biswajit Sarkar, who prided himself on rational thinking. Sarkar had worked for Indian Railways for 15 years and was convinced that the Begunkodor haunting was nothing more than mass hysteria. "Ghosts don't operate train stations," Sarkar declared to his nervous staff. "Dead people don't punch tickets. We're here to run a railway, not entertain village superstitions." Sarkar's confidence lasted exactly 4 days. On his 4th night at Begunkodor, he was working late in the station office. The station was locked and empty, with the last train having departed hours earlier. At 11:47 p.m., the exact time noted in Ghosh's journal, every piece of electronic equipment in the office simultaneously malfunctioned. The telegraph machine began tapping out nonsensical messages. The electric lights flickered in a rhythmic pattern. And then, through the cacophony of mechanical chaos, Sarkar heard something that made his blood freeze, the sound of a woman weeping. The crying seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing through the walls, rising from beneath the floor, drifting down from the ceiling. It was a sound of absolute despair, of grief so profound that it seemed to seep into Sarkar's very soul. Fighting down his rising panic, Sarkar grabbed a flashlight and ventured onto the platform. What he found there would haunt him for the rest of his life. The woman in white stood at the edge of the platform, her back to him. She was no longer alone. Arranged in a semicircle around her were dozens of other figuresmen, women, and children in traditional Santal dress from different eras, spanning decades or perhaps centuries. All of them were translucent. All of them were staring directly at him. The woman in white slowly turned around. Her face now appeared to be partially decomposed. Flesh hung in tatters from her cheekbones, and where her eyes should have been, 2 points of cold blue light flickered like dying stars. "You build on our bones," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the platform. "You profit from our pain. The debt grows larger." One by one, the other figures began to move toward Sarkar. Their collective presence created a psychic pressure so intense that Sarkar felt his knees beginning to buckle. "7 more days," the woman continued. "7 more days, and the debt comes due. Tell your masters, return our bones to sacred ground, or join us in the darkness beneath the rails." The apparitions began to fade, but their voices lingered in the air, a chorus of the dead reciting names and dates in the Santal language. Sarkar later learned these were the names and death dates of every person whose remains had been disturbed during the station's construction. Sarkar fled that night. He abandoned his post and career, never to return to railway service. His official report contained a single recommendation: close Begunkodor Station permanently. Some places are not meant for the living. But Indian Railways was not ready to surrender to supernatural forces. They sent teams of investigators, engineers, and anthropologists. Every scientific instrument recorded anomalous readings: electromagnetic field fluctuations with no source, temperature variations that defied physics, and audio recordings that captured voices speaking in ancient dialects. Most disturbing were the photographs. Every camera brought to Begunkodor captured the same inexplicable images: shadowy figures standing on the tracks, faces in empty train car windows, and always the woman in white with her arms outstretched. The breaking point came when a team of railway engineers arrived to perform structural surveys. One engineer, Aditya Kumar, made the mistake of approaching the tracks to investigate strange singing voices. According to his colleagues, Kumar suddenly stopped moving and stood perfectly still. When they called out to him, he turned around with an expression of absolute terror. "They're down there," he whispered. "All of them, stacked like cordwood beneath the rails. They're angry, they're so very angry." Kumar was found the next morning, sitting catatonic on the platform. He had aged decades overnight, his hair had turned completely white, and his face bore deep lines that hadn't been there the day before. He never spoke coherently again, spending his remaining years in a psychiatric facility, constantly drawing pictures of skeletal hands reaching up through railway tracks. Word of these incidents spread throughout the railway network. No amount of money could convince workers to take assignments at Begunkodor. Trains began passing through without stopping, their engineers reporting that they could see figures standing on the platform even in broad daylight. Local villagers had reached their breaking point. Panic gripped the area and people started avoiding the station. There were reports of people being pulled toward passing trains. The Santal community formally petitioned the government to remove the railway station and perform proper burial rites for their disturbed ancestors. Their petition contained a chilling warning: "The woman you call Ghost is Maya, daughter of the earth spirits. She guards the sleep of our people. You have broken the sacred ground and scattered the bones of generations. Until the bones are returned to proper rest, the angry dead will know no peace, and neither will the living." In a decision unprecedented in Indian railway history, Begunkodor Railway Station was officially closed in 1967 and remained closed for 42 years. For 4 decades, Begunkodor Station stood empty, its platforms being reclaimed by jungle vegetation. Trains would slow as they approached the abandoned station, but they never stopped. And on clear nights, passengers would press their faces to the windows and see her, the woman in white, still walking her eternal vigil along the tracks. Chapter 4. 42 years of silence had done nothing to diminish the supernatural forces at Begunkodor. When Indian Railways announced plans to reopen the station in 2009, local celebrations were mixed with deep apprehension among those who remembered the terror of 1967. The decision came from political pressure. When Mamata Banerjee announced new trains for West Bengal, she wanted the Ranchi Hatia Express to stop at Begunkodor. "I don't believe in ghosts. It is all man-made," Mamata Banerjee reportedly told railway officials. The modern railway administration brought in construction crews to clear overgrown vegetation and repair the deteriorated platform. The workers, mostly young men from other districts who knew nothing of Begunkodor's history, began their tasks with enthusiasm. That enthusiasm lasted exactly 1 week. The first sign of trouble came when construction workers began finding human remains while clearing vegetation around the platform foundation. Archaeological surveys revealed what local Santal elders had known all along. The station had been built directly over a Santal burial ground containing the remains of dozens of tribal ancestors. Some bones appeared to have been recently disturbed, as if something had been digging them up from beneath the platform. More disturbing still, the bones were arranged in patterns that seemed deliberate T-geometric designs that hurt to look at directly. Dr. Anupam Chakraborty, the archaeologist brought in to examine the remains, reported findings that defied conventional understanding. The bone arrangements show evidence of recent manipulation, he wrote. However, the patterns themselves appear to predate any known Santal cultural practices. As renovation work progressed, the construction crew began experiencing increasingly disturbing phenomena. Tools would disappear overnight, only to be found arranged in circles around the burial sites. Heavy machinery would malfunction without explanation. Workers began reporting sightings of a woman in white who would appear during their lunch breaks. The project supervisor, Ranjit Mondal, initially dismissed these reports as typical construction site superstitions. That changed on the night he decided to work late. Mondal was alone on the platform when he heard footsteps approaching. Looking up, he saw a woman in a white sari walking toward him with an odd, gliding motion. "Excuse me, madam," Mondal called out. "This is a construction site. You shouldn't be here after dark." The woman continued approaching until she stood directly under the generator's harsh light. What Mondal saw made him drop his blueprints and stumble backward. The woman's face was partially transparent, showing the skull beneath translucent flesh. Her sari was stained with dark patches that looked suspiciously like blood. "You disturb us again. You scatter our bones again. Have you learned nothing from the first lesson?" Behind her, more figures began emerging from the darkness, men, women, and children in various states of decomposition, all wearing traditional dress from different time periods. "We are the forgotten dead," the woman continued. "We are the price of your progress, and we will not be silenced again." The supernatural encounter was witnessed by 3 other workers. All 4 men quit their jobs the following day and refused to return to Begunkodor under any circumstances. Despite these incidents, railway authorities pressed forward with the reopening. They hired new construction crews, brought in security guards, and even arranged for blessing ceremonies. Nothing worked. Every team brought to Begunkodor reported the same phenomena. The station was reopened in 2009, but from the moment regular train service resumed, it became clear that the supernatural forces had not been appeased. Although trains halt regularly, passengers avoid using the station after sunset. It is believed that twice a week, a girl is seen running with the train on the same day when she died. Modern passengers began reporting experiences that echoed the terrors of the past. Sudden temperature drops while waiting on the platform, the sound of weeping coming from empty train cars, and sightings of a woman in white who would appear in the windows of moving trains. One particularly detailed account came from Priya Sharma, a software engineer traveling from Ranchi to Kolkata in 2015. She was dozing in her seat when she was awakened by someone crying. Looking around the compartment, she saw a woman in a white sari sitting across the aisle, tears streaming down her decomposing face. "I wanted to help her," Sharma wrote in her blog, "but something told me not to approach. She looked at me with these hollow eyes and whispered, 'Tell them to return our bones. Tell them the debt is not paid.' When I blinked, she was gone, but the seat was ice cold and covered with condensation that spelled out Maya in Bengali script." A 2017 investigation by rationalists attempted to debunk the paranormal claims. The West Bengal group Paschim Banga Bigyan Mancha camped at the station overnight but recorded no paranormal activity. However, around 2 a.m., they heard strange sounds from behind the station building and discovered a group of men making the noises artificially. While this investigation suggested human manipulation of some phenomena, it failed to explain the consistent reports from multiple independent witnesses over decades, the documented deaths of railway personnel, or the archaeological evidence of disturbed burial grounds. Today, Begunkodor Station operates under an unofficial protocol that acknowledges its supernatural reputation. Train crews are instructed to maintain speed while passing through the station after dark. Night guards and locals report unexplained sounds and eerie silences that suddenly envelop the station. The station is now being promoted as a ghost tourist destination, but this commercialization has only seemed to anger the resident spirits further. Local Santal elders warn that until proper ritual reburial of the disturbed remains is performed, the dead will continue to walk the railway tracks of Begunkodor. The woman in white Maya, guardian of the Santal dead still, makes her nightly rounds at 11:47 p.m. Passengers occasionally glimpse her through train windows, standing motionless on the platform as their cars rush past. She serves as a reminder that some debts can never be repaid, some wounds never heal. The true horror of Begunkodor lies not in the supernatural phenomena themselves, but in what they represent, the price of progress built upon the bones of the forgotten, the rage of the dispossessed, and the eternal vigilance of those who guard the boundary between the living and the dead. As trains continue to carry passengers through this cursed station, Maya's warning echoes in the whistle of every locomotive: respect the dead, honor the sacred, and remember that some ground should never be disturbed, for the consequences may last far longer than any earthly life. The debt remains unpaid, the dead remember, and Maya waits, eternal in her vigil, for justice that may never come.